I understand, like, hey, this is an idea I had for Star Wars, but I think I would have went through enough to not have the similarities show up.
Damn.
$4.95.
Yeah, for
Okay.
90. And I don't think that's with
And
shipping.
shipping is
Yeah,
$100.
yeah. So
The Shadow Crew Podcast.
I don't know, man. I will say though, it was kind of cool to go back into some comic stores, though, comic
yes.
shops.
Hmm.
I hadn't been going regularly. It's still
Hmm.
important, man. I hope they thrive. It still exists for my daughter when she gets older to actually be able
Hmm.
to go into a shop and pick up a book and talk to somebody and get excited. I'm all for the digital stuff, but I hope it stays. Uh,
Well, I think if they restructure some stuff and like really start paying attention, and I think it will still be around, but it's going to take a reform. It's going to take a major reform. Like you're really going to have to start thinking about it through the publishers and through the companies. It's going to take everyone. This is one of those things that it can't be just the shop owners and what are they going to do. I think as an industry whole, just like when it came out of the pandemic and McFarlane and Diamond and everybody's initiative for the shops. Like, it's like all the car dealerships. Ford and Dodge and the rest of them need to start thinking about what are they going to do to keep those, because you don't have those dealerships, there's going to be a problem. Well, the same thing is that the industry as a total have to start looking at ways, how can we make these shops a little bit better?
yeah.
A good thing would be to have like a summit of
Mm,
the comic book industry, all the professionals, the people that write and draw,
mm,
and the shop owners, all the different people, and some people that are collectors. So, it's like everyone can try and figure out and throw out ideas and see, like, what can we do to,
mm.
because otherwise the industry isn't going to be around in 10 years or
Yeah.
less.
Mhm.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. I think there needs to be more innovative thinking. I know we threw some ideas around. I don't know if it was on air or through text, but like more social environments where people could read books and do other
Mhm.
things, right? Like just the reading in general obviously is not a popular thing for most folks to do nowadays with
Mhm.
just like
Mhm.
social media and all digital. But I think there needs to be a new way. Like I'm all for keeping some of the comic shops still the way they
Of
exist.
course.
I said, but I
Mhm.
think someone needs to come along and do something a little bit different. It'd be
Mhm.
cool, you know. What was that thing? We got a copyright. It was a comics and cues, barbecues and comic like that. You know, like that's cool, man. Like
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
me you wouldn't like if that was a couple miles away from my house and you could get some spare ribs and then sit around a table and talk Batman. I That'd be out amazing,
Hmm.
right? So
Well, it's just like Starbucks. It's like GameStop tried to a certain extent and tried to mix games and that, but Starbucks and music was a big hit.
yeah, yep,
They've got to start thinking of places high traffic where can you actually change the narrative of comics.
yep.
And the same way, like Scholastic is doing a killer in schools. This is why that and a Random Penguin House have been doing, because they're doing like they did when I was a kid. They're pumping books to kids. A lot of them are mangas, or a lot of them are the Diary of what was it, the Wimpy Kid.
Yep.
That stuff's pumped in the schools. Well, comics has to sitting around and putting stuff on the shelf and hoping somebody comes in the store. That's not going to work. That's not an active plan. They're going to maybe have to start doing some outsourcing, maybe. You
Yep.
know.
Yeah, and you're talking about Scholastic. I just looked this up. I thought a great comic book that would
Mhm.
get people interested and into stores. It doesn't exist, but a Harry Potter comic.
Hmm.
You start, I mean, that could be like a
Sure.
300 issue run of
Hmm.
every book along the way, and you do every scene and all that kind of stuff. And, that's something I think would be huge. And I looked it up, and there's fan comics, but they haven't done an
Mm,
actual one.
interesting. Is there
All
Game
right.
of Thrones? Does Game of Thrones have a comic?
I
They
don't think
did
I've ever
have,
seen one. Did they?
I think so. Let me
I
see.
wonder, was that blessed by him? Did he sign off on? Because he's very.
Yeah,
I
they
don't.
did Game of Thrones graphic novel volume 1.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
Who? What was the publisher? That's another one. Like I think would be kind of cool.
Dynamite.
Oh,
Oh,
okay. Well, no wonder I never heard of it.
They
yeah.
did 4 volumes.
Their PR ain't great, man. I mean, you got Game of Thrones as a license, and none of us knew that actually happened.
I
That's a
never,
problem.
I never even
Are you
saw it
kidding
in
me?
the shop or store, man. Yeah.
Game of Thrones? This is like the biggest, one of the biggest IPs. Are you kidding me? What is happening? I don't know, man. Well, I know it's the holiday season, and we don't wait to buy toys for ourselves or for friends, family, kids, all that stuff. We talk about toys throughout the year at each podcast. We're excited to talk a little bit more about toys, including in a little bit our favorite toy of 2023, and also maybe a toy we're thinking about buying, but the price was too high. What's overpriced? But before we get into that big news announcement this past week about Hasbro, a lot of layoffs happening across multiple organizations, but this one impacted one of the big powerhouses in the toy field. So I guess the big question is, what does this say about Hasbro, about toys in general? And then I think the second thing is there was another announcement when it came to Hasbro around McFarlane, and I think the question is like, so what is it? Like, is there a problem? Is Hasbro struggling? So I'd love to get everyone's thoughts on that, because obviously the timing is a bit rough considering it's the 15th of December, so close to the holidays.
Yeah, I thought this week, like we were talking a little earlier, was I think Hasbro was a tad bit tone deaf to the narrative this week, and I don't think that they really, as much as these companies are. Look, the job of a corporation that's publicly traded is to make money for the stockholders. That's just as simple as it is. If you're a private run corporation, you could do whatever you want. But when you're a made for profit company like Hasbro is, stockholders is how it runs. The sales were sluggish, and we've all seen that through the Ole's, through the Rosses, through the Burlingtons, through all the discount stores. We're seeing all these figures pop back up for 3 times less than the price they were on Hasbro Pulse and everything. So, they start off the week by releasing 1,100 people. And then they make an announcement that it's Todd McFarlane, I believe that's like on a Tuesday, maybe it might have been the same day, Monday or later that afternoon, that McFarlane would be taking over. A certain little deal had been struck. And apparently, from what I understand, it's supposed to be for the Page Punchers, which is the 3 3/4 inch figures, along which are less detailed, and they have a comic in the back. Now, look, I think that's a smart idea. A lot of those are introductory things to younger audience members when you're walking through. The books are, well, the Page Punchers are kind of like price not astronomical. It is in a point where if you're in the store, you get a comic and a little action figure. It's your introductory thing into comics and also toys. Very smart decision, but Hasbro to let that out and be like, okay, we're going to let McFarlane do this, and then a week before they were, or maybe 2 weeks, they were saying that the O-ring line of like G.I. Joe was given to Super 7. No major company starts subletting other companies do their stuff. There is a problem, and maybe they don't want to take the losses anymore. They don't mind, for Todd McFarlane, and they don't mind for Super 7. And let's be honest, if Hasbro's $1 billion company, do you really think McFarlane can take a bunch of losses? Do you really think Super 7 can take those losses? So in a way, it kind of seems like they propped them up to set the fail, because if Super 7, and Super 7's been, Super 7 had a rough week with that Cobra mothership that did not go through. And like, I pretty much, when I saw the design, I thought it was interesting.
How much was it? What was the price on it?
You know what? I don't know, Julian. You want to
A
look
couple
that up?
$100 or something?
I know it wasn't a couple $100. It was way more. It was way more than that.
Oh, really?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was right around the over $350 to the $450 range.
Damn.
$495.
Yeah,
Okay.
$495. And I don't think that's
And
with shipping.
Shipping is
Yeah.
$100.
Yeah, so that was
the hell?
just tone deaf, bro.
So $600 if you want it. And find a
on a
place to put it too. You might have to buy a new house.
oh no, that thing's huge, but also on a something that only made an appearance in like an opening title sequence. It was never part of the show. So for them to say, "Well, this is the biggest thing that we're going to make," and I it's tough because it only got I think it was only backed by 1,400 people and they needed 4,000 to get to the ratio. There's rarely like most of these crowdfunders that low.
Damn.
Normally they're asking for like, 7, 8,000, somewhere around there. They're like, no, we only need 4,000 to break even on this kind of scenario. And they got 1,400 in 30 days. And like, that's as much as the cat's lair, look, you're bleeding out the consumers. Why do you think everybody's waiting for the stuff to pop up in Ross? We just, they keep like the classified line. I love classified, but I'll be like amazed where they just had a fan cast last week talking about more pre-orders that you can get. It's like you're constantly bleeding down the consumers, and we're in the country's in economic turn and everything else. How are you going to keep your ambition more than your grasp on this? It doesn't make any sense. Dr.
Yep.
Brentley, you got any ideas on this?
Stop making stupid big stuff that's really expensive that nobody can afford. I mean, I don't know what they're thinking with that. Like the Batwing, at least that's more well known, right? And it was more expensive too.
Yeah.
But that's also something that it had a lot more, I don't know, not articulation, but it had like the lights and, all the stuff. It looked great. You could put it on the wall. And yeah, I don't think the Cobra mothership had anything that was like a stand,
No,
right?
it
Or
did
a
have a
stand, but
well.
not on
They
the
didn't.
wall.
From what I saw, it wasn't like wasn't stated enough, obviously. But I saw another picture like just recently where it had like I guess like thruster rocket like I guess like exhaust burn that went under all three sections as a stand, and
Mm.
I hadn't even seen that before, so I was like, wow. But I just thought like number one, who has it's just like the cat's lair. Like we were joking early in the year about like you're gonna see somebody sitting on the side of the freeway with like we'll work for the cat's lair, because it's like they keep hitting you harder, more and more.
I mean, you said it like this particular ship was not a major element of the show.
Hmm.
So I could understand it was like a Millennium Falcon type. I mean, it was like a Millennium Falcon meets the
Hmm.
Enterprise. Like, it's just funny how it's designed. I'm
Hmm.
sure there'd be more interest, but if it was something that was like not super featured, it'd be like selling that some rare Star Wars spaceship that was featured briefly in one of the movies, but is someone really going to spend $400 or $500? The $100 shipping, f you, man. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
no,
Wow.
thank you. Are you kidding
Uh,
me? And where Amazon's doing free shipping, you know what I mean? Come on, get your shit together. So
well,
I don't know,
it,
man. I think, look, we've said it before with these clearance houses, and I'm not. This is not Hasbro specific, but
mhm,
I'm 100% confident. Like the retro line of the Star Wars smaller figures that
mhm,
they released in the traditional packaging that was from the old Star Wars line, but also like Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Mandalorian. If all the times I saw those individual figures, I would have had 90% of the entire collection based
mhm,
off just
mhm,
going to Ross. At
mhm,
some point in time, I saw C3PO, I saw, you know, all of them like Obi-Wan, Darth, and they were all $4 to $5
mhm,
versus paying whatever they were, I think $11.99 for them. Like that just gives you an example of like if I'm a collector and seen that, if
mhm.
another line releases that is not super limited edition, like the coolest figure that's limited run, I'm gonna wait a couple months
Yeah.
and
Mhm,
I'm gonna be aggressive and go to the Rosses and the Burlingtons and all these other clearance houses and try to collect it. And whatever I don't find, maybe I'll pay a bit of a premium to get the last one or two off eBay or something. So
well,
it's in trouble. It's in trouble in the action figure world right now. it is in trouble. I think the only ones that have been relatively successful have been like the NECAs with like limited release, cool IPs, and they're not like sitting on 900 figures at a Target. Like you see like 2 of the werewolf, or you see, you know, 2 of Freddy Krueger. That's the problem. Is like just too much inventory.
Well, it's just like, I understand that they're trying to meet their demand, but I also think they're price hiking. Like, we were all talking about like the stuff that we're seeing at Ross's and everything else of that. Well, it's like, Ollie's. I remember when Chet was out in his home neighborhood, and he happened to come across the Sergeant Slaughters. I had paid full bolt for that, and I think that was like 34 something on Hasbro Pulse. And here he's telling me, like, literally less than like 3 months later, hey man, it's here for like $6.99. You're like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And so what it started me to do is to wait. And the same thing, like I can pop up right here because, like I said, we had a bunch of stuff in the review, but Crocmaster right here. Now this was, I think, 34, maybe 44.
I saw that in
Yeah.
Target for the actual retail price.
Look at
Yep.
the retail price.
A couple
I
months
picked it up
ago.
for
I
Ross.
remember seeing that. Yeah.
$11.99, brother. $11.99. This was, and now I had held off because I'm like, really, did I really want this character? And I'm like, I'm not going to pay that amount of money. And then Shadow and I was in the Ross, and he was like, brother, Crocmaster's here. And I saw it $11.99. I was like, okay, but how long is that going to keep lasting? That's the thing we have to ask for. Is it how long are they going? Is Hasbro going to move into limited editions and so many prints, and then you're going to run into problems with the scalpers? Because I think they're overprinting. Because at one point, Classified, the first like line before anyone knew, you were paying through the roof scalper prices, and I refused to do that. And I always waited for like the lowest price figures. Sometimes I just playing the long game, but they're going to have to do the balancement they're doing it at is you can't keep dumping shit to us and then expecting everyone to purchase it all and have the fun to continuously purchase it all,
Yep. Well, we'll jump into toys a little bit later. Again, stay tuned for the favorite toys of 2023. But a couple of different things happened in the film industry this week. One in particular, I think one of the most hyped franchises that is hitting Netflix soon, Rebel Moon, Zack Snyder's take on Star Wars, his chance to develop a brand new series. And thus far, the Rotten Tomatoes scores are not very favorable. Early critic reviews at the time of this podcast have it at a 24% of 42 reviews. And although fans have gone in numerous bunches and have elevated the fan score to 74, there are multiple people reporting that some of those don't feel right, as if, are they fraudulent? Are they Zack Snyder fanboys? Have they actually seen it? So with that being said, Rebel Moon, I know we all agreed, hey, we just want to watch it, but what's your take on early reviews? Could this be good, or are we in store for another disappointment of another sci-fi action franchise?
Well, I think that probably critics were looking to go after Zack Snyder straight off the bat. It's he's not been a very popular. I think 300 was probably the top of his game, and after that, he's gotten a lot of hate. But then he's also got this huge fan base that love absolutely everything he does, whether it's good or bad. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that is just sort of the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, you can't say that it's bad, it's great. No, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah.
Well,
it's almost like like that's what it was at one point with Joss Whedon. Remember? Like anything that he touched, all the fanboys were just like untouchable. He's great, like he did all that stuff. And obviously some things happened that, some issues there, but it almost feels the same. Like he's got this following that he could pump out the biggest piece of shit and people would still be grateful for what he's been able to do on the big screen. So it is interesting.
Well, I think it what Whedon did him, and I think once he did Avengers 2, it seemed like just the world turned on him. You know, it was like the one aspect that I think people were thinking, like, how could you do the first Avengers so great, and then what happened with the second one? But that happens a lot. You know, sometimes when you come back from a sequel, it's it doesn't pan out, and I think that was it just didn't pan out. But it seemed like that's when the wind kicked the sail for Wheaton, and then problems started to occur with Snyder. Look, let's be honest with you. 300 is his probably best reviewed film.
Yep.
Watchmen was diversive. Sucker Punch was mostly maligned by a bunch of people, and then Man of Steel. Most of his movies are debatable. You know, it's like whether there's some people that are passionate about him, love him. I personally, I thought the Army of the Dead was a so-so film. I didn't think it had the strongest storyline to it, but it had some decent action to it. It was, you know, it wasn't a bright for Netflix. Actually, it was, you know, I could watch it again. I thought actually the Army of Thieves was way better than the Army of the Dead. Actually, that was a pretty good prequel, and it tied in quite well. So with Rebel Moon, I think that there's naturally look whenever you take an idea that was supposed to be something else, and from what we understand, he's just made some changes, but there's still a tone of the original product that was supposed to be Star Wars.
Yeah.
I,
Yep.
I think that's gonna be the tough part because you're gonna have people that are Star Wars fans, and then there's Zack Snyder fans, and then there's the critics right down in the middle that could go either way on it. So that's a you know I understand like hey this is the idea I had for Star Wars, but I think I would have went through enough to not have the similarities show up in the final product.
Yeah, he probably, because if you've spent all the time making a story, breaking it down, figuring out the characters, and you're very happy with what you've got, and it's a Star Wars movie, and they say, actually, we don't want to do this. And you're like, okay, you're not going to change the story. I'm just going to scribble out a couple names, you know,
Mhm.
that, no, this is not C3PO. This is, this Anthony Hopkins playing a droid.
And I can be honest with you. Look, it's not like just to share a little bit of that. There's certain times where Dr. Brentley and I have been contacted by someone to do a script, and it hadn't went favorable when it was over. We were able to attain the rights back to the script, and we repurposed it for something for us. But we went through major changes. I think there was like well, just to give away a little bit of situation. There was a George Romero the Night of the Living Dead kind of like adaptation that we were up for, and we had came up with a story because we've heard what his original story was, and we both couldn't believe that you're not going to make this movie, right? And so we pitched a completely different version of what we thought a continuation of that franchise would be compared to what we heard in this initial points, and they came back and they didn't like it, and they were like, hey, thank you so much and everything, but you guys can, keep your synopsis and everything else of that. And then we repurposed it into another film and title, and that's somewhere in development down the line. But it's so I know it happens, but I just think that maybe it might have been. This is seeming like it's a little slap in the face to Disney. Like you should have done this, and I think he wanted people to know that this was his Star Wars script.
Yeah.
That
Even
was
the
not his.
trailer, the
Mhm.
posters, it
The two
feels very
lightsabers or whatever
it
they're
feels
calling
very
them.
Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hey, hey, good luck to him. I think he's a great visionary. I love the behind the scenes imagery that he did on the Army of the Dead, where they were showing a lot of the like, hey, I made this new lens, and this is what I think. He's very passionate, and you need that same kind of passion. But is Snyder as talented as Nolan? There's one I think Nolan has a better grasp on story, structure, and people, while I think Snyder is technicalities and effects and things. I think they're two different, but you can see where one's obviously way more successful with something because they actually the meat and potatoes is story and what you're seeing on screen, not the effects and like new technology to use.
Well,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that you can get away with not being so great technically if you've got a
Mhm.
great story.
Exactly.
If you've got amazing technical stuff, but I
Mhm.
don't care about any of the characters or what's happening, it's
Mhm.
terrible. So it looks great, but I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I knew he went too far when I saw a character named Barbar Jinx, and I knew at this point it's too much of a ripoff. You know, and then
Well,
there was a cantina scene with a rhinoceros that was blue playing a flute, and I was like, he's taking it too far.
yes.
Um, Speaking of potentially taking it too far, an amazing, iconic film made in 1984, starring Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop, and 3 years later, Beverly Hills Cop 2, pretty damn good as well.
Mhm.
Took him 13 years to make a third one that is forgettable and should have never been made.
Not
Yeah.
And
forgettable.
now, yeah,
I can't get it out of my mind sometimes. It's like, what did you do?
but 20 years later,
Mhm.
after the third really bad one,
Mhm.
we are going to get Axel Foley's return on Netflix in 2024. The trailer released this past week. I didn't really tell much. I did think it was cool at the end when they had the detectives with him
Mhm.
in the back, but man, it's 20 years later. What are we doing? What are we
Well,
doing?
Judge Reinhold is looking a little. I don't know the kind word to use, but not great.
Yes.
Everyone
Mhm.
else, like, yeah, John Ashton, he's an older man. He's got to be in his like 70s.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Um,
Mhm.
but he still looks similar. Judge Reinhold doesn't like. I was like, what? Oh,
Well, you
he
had to
kind of
think
looks
about the
like,
last time you saw him actually
yeah.
on screen. It has been a while. But you're right. But I thought uh, what's it? I can't remember his name. Bronston. He looked
Oh,
pretty
oh
good.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Bronson Pinchot.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's it. Couldn't
he
think of it.
looked like, and I
Or
thought,
Pinshu, Pinson, whatever the
Yeah,
hell
what?
his name is. Yeah.
Pinchot.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's interesting too. Also, this is like well, technically, it should be kind of considered Beverly Hills Cop 5 because they did the pilot that they shot and never released, and that was supposed to be for CBS. And everyone had said, and a couple of insiders that we know was like it was good. It just they decided not to go through with it, but they said it was actually pretty good.
Because Eddie Murphy wasn't going to be in every single episode. It
Well,
was his son or whatever. So that was
obviously
the sticking point, I'm sure. It's like,
you don't expect Eddie to
we
do
got
TV, brother.
we got Beverly
You
Hills
know?
Cop. It has to
Yeah.
have Axel Foley in it,
Yeah,
you
you
know.
can't. No, no, no. You can't do no weekly show with Eddie Murphy. He's not going to do that.
Well, what I'm really sad about is that Eddie Murphy, in my opinion, has had a bunch of really badass roles over his career. But the
Hmm.
three that stand out to me, obviously, is Axel Foley, is Akeem in Coming to America, and then I forget the character's name, but 48 Hours, like one and
Yes.
like
Hmm.
both were great.
Hmm.
That Coming to America that came back was fucking horrendous, in my opinion.
Hmm.
This, I hope, isn't the same. You're basically ruining these iconic movies for a new generation that's going to be like, geez, that's what you all were into? Like, come on, man. Like, I wish they would just make it like, write it like it's 1984, film it like it's 84. Why do you have to do this like 2024 version? I don't know. I get you're appealing to the masses,
Of
but
course.
has anybody successfully done that where you're taking something that's 20, 30, 40, 50 and bringing it back and kind of making it like the secret sauce of the past? Maybe because, again, Hollywood is always thinking of the current audience, but I think retro is kind of in right now. And if you shot
Hmm.
it in that way, I think it would work. It doesn't seem like they did it here, but I'm just saying.
Well,
No,
look, the trailer looked good. Yeah, it had the beats in it. They did enough where I was like, "Well, this looks nothing like the third," and the tone seemed more direct to one and two. And let's be honest, like Eddie's kind of like there was the Disney money grabs at a certain point of his career, and there weren't good films. But let's also remember that he's had some gems in that too. Like, although that Coming to America wasn't great, but My Name is Dolomite was fantastic. Eddie acted and went. Even Wesley Snipes was amazing in that film. And then there was the movie that he did with Steve Martin. I can't remember what was the
Bowfinger
Bowfinger. He's had some gems in between here.
and
Uh,
But they're
Dreamgirls.
very,
yeah.
they're very like small. Like,
Yes.
you know what I
Yes.
mean? It's not like these big budget films. That's what I'm concerned about. Is you got
Yeah.
Netflix behind this, and you're playing Axel Foley. So will it be? Will too many hands in the cookie jar here, and everyone has got this got to be great, and how many reshoots and edits or whatever. I just get concerned because it's one of my favorite
It is.
class. Like I go watch Beverly Hills Cop anytime it's on, it stays on.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like,
It's
Hmm.
the first 1 and 2 is I've never had to revisit 3 after the first time I saw that in theaters, and that was unfortunately a great director too was John Landis, and I was like completely disappointed in that movie.
Well, that was John Landis on his decline.
Of
You
course,
know,
but still, you don't want to see someone like go in that direction that's had such a stellar career.
yeah,
But
I will
yeah,
say
it
the
looks intriguing, man.
the one thing I really hated about the trailer was the music, because they always try and do this with older shit where it's like, oh, we'll use the classic theme, but then we have to make
We'll have
it
to up it.
rappy and we have to, something the kids will like. It's
Mhm.
like, no.
yeah.
It would have been great if it was just do 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 do
Mm-hmm.
do do, and do like maybe a little echo and something, dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun. And no, but they do this whole
But you
rap
got to
song
admit
and
though,
everything.
for a beat trailer, it did hit the beats because it was like
Yeah.
boom, pop, boom, pop, boom. They did everything that you're supposed to do in an actual trailer. It wasn't stagnant. And then when the cameos came up, they were right place. So whoever did that trailer, bravo to you, because you got me hyped enough where I'm like, when it said 2020 summer 2024, I'm like, you got me. That in Games of Thrones or House of Dragons, you got me. The summer is going to be a damn good summer for 2024. I don't know
Yeah.
what the movies are looking
Well,
like.
what
You know,
about the final conclusion of Stranger Things on Netflix
I
too?
heard that too.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you saw the rumors, but there
I
was
have.
a cast list,
Mhm,
and one particular was blacked out, and so
mhm.
there's theories of like who
Coming
was
back from the
scratched up,
dead.
like who is that? Was that? I think it's a PR stunt to get people talking about it, but like I think is expecting somebody to return, so we'll see. That'd be
Well,
cool, but.
Well, and I know Linda Hamilton is going to be in the new
uh-huh.
season.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
shit! That means the
They're
Terminator
bringing
is going
back
to be
80s
there.
people.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. This was all a Terminator movie.
Vecna turns into Liquid Terminator. Holy shit! Yeah, it's a whole. Well, look, I wish that it's good. I hope the Zack Snyder stuff's good. I hope Beverly Hills Cop is good, but I do not have a lot of hopes, and I have very, very low expectations. So maybe that'll offset it. Now moving into, as we promised, the crew's favorite toys of 2023. Um, what have you purchased in 23, or perhaps like you think it's a great toy and you're thinking about buying, saving up some funds or haven't pulled the trigger yet. So we can kind of talk through that. And then also, what was a toy purchase that was released this year that was just too damn expensive to purchase or
Mhm.
crowdfunded? We just talked about, I mean, this isn't mine, but I would say, like, if I had stupid money to burn, that damn Batwing would be hanging from my ceiling, no question, with the cables. But
Mhm.
that's another story. So let's talk about it. Favorite
Yeah.
toy.
Uh, well, like I said, for me this year, like I said again, it's something that I waited for about a year and a half, and it's sitting right behind me. Everything will move out of the way, right there. The his tank, fantastic. Like Hasbro, as much as everybody has like problems with the situation, everything he did, that was well worth the money. I would have done it again with hands down. The item that I think that was too expensive. Um, I don't know if I would have purchased it though, but I thought that Cat's Lair was probably the most ridiculous price of like anything that I had heard. And then they put the mothership price up, Super Seven, again 2 times in 1 year. They tried to jump the shark. uh, that cat slayer is ridiculous. First of all, just the space is evolved. I thought that his tank was going to be way bigger than what this was, and when I actually got out of the box, I was relieved because I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know, the amount of space. You just started giving up spaces here, but that was. I would say, yeah, I was the cat slayer was the thing that I thought was a bridge too far because I'm a big Thundercats fan, but I'm like that's like a coffee table almost. This shit that
Well,
makes no
just
sense.
the two of those things, right? Like the mothership and the cat's
Mhm.
lair, that's like the size of a twin bed.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
huge.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Now the thing I was disappointed on that I was not going to get. I was gifted for my Christmas present. It's not going to be showing up, but I'm looking forward to it. So I guess it'll be the best of stuff in 2024. Was Ace from Ramen Toys, the Ramen Racer, which is technically, I guess, a redo of the Engine of Vengeance, but they call it something else. But I'm looking forward to making it. You can do 3 packs on it. It's a 69 Charger that you can change to the Fast and Furious version or the Fast or whatever you want to call that makes you not have a lawsuit. And then there's also you can change it into Blade's Charger, which there'll be space on the shelf, and Blade will be right next to his Charger. It'll be in the Batmobile. There'll be the well, there's several Batmobiles back there, but but that's what I've heard. It got moved out to sometime maybe end of January, February. So I was looking forward to that, man. So
Awesome. It was funny. I was down. How I would have never guessed.
yes.
that's the only thing I've bought this year is the Indiana Jones shit. So, you
Mm,
know, these little guys, that's the only thing I bought in a long time.
yeah.
And almost got the whole set until it all started showing up on clearance. So that, between Shadow and Chet, I probably will complete the collection.
Mhm.
Yeah. I thought that one of the Indiana Jones figures showed up as some of the best action figure. That one particularly showed up as one of the best action figures of 2023.
Well, the likeness is, I will give
Yeah.
credit. It looks like Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, I think when we were watching the Hasbro Pulse event that they had done, and they had the look of it, and I was like, wow. I said, you know what? The scans on that looked as good as some of the Black Series, and
Mhm.
this is the first time Indy's been at that 6-inch kind of height. And I was like, wow, the articulation, everything. There's an Indy sitting right there too. I had to do that for Dr. Brentley, so,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, that was that's probably one of the better likenesses from films I thought I saw all year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they were saying that the sales on the 6-inch figures were pretty good.
Yeah.
It was the retro line that was the smaller figures that
Mhm.
tanked, and those were like almost immediately on clearance.
Well, the same thing with the, like, where Chris was talking about the Star Wars retros.
Hmm.
I just don't think there's an audience for that. And plus, I do think they are overpriced because you're getting look, it's not like they're burning a lot of plastic for this. You have
Yeah.
3-inch lines that are not very well articulated either. Um, so I could more than understand that. What's one of the things that you thought it was a roll too far this year, Dr. Brentley?
I mean, just those things we've been talking about. I don't follow many of these other lines or anything, so I just hear about this stuff from you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite that I recently purchased, and it probably goes against what we've been talking about, but it is a McFarlane toy, and I think Mr. Storm could appreciate it. I purchased the Batman and Batmobile Gold Label 2-pack from 1989.
You really did.
I did, and it is badass. I got to tell you.
Well, see, now the funny thing about that is that now there's a non-gold label one. Let me just scoop myself out of the way. There's a non-gold label one up at the
See,
top.
I'm talking to the right. I'm talking to the
That's
right guy.
so there's the non-gold label one. But
Oh man, it's my favorite
after I
Batmobile.
after I purchased it, look, it's amazing. It's just this one. Everybody's bitching about the canopies, or like it's too great. Who cares? It sits in the shelf. No one's gonna care, you know. But I did like the subtle changes. It's just that I had already purchased that, and something told me when I did to have waited because I was like, he's
They're gonna
probably
do
gonna.
another one. Yeah,
And it's smart of him. He's done that, and then that Batwing too. That was like fantastic. McFarlane
yep,
did a great job on vehicles, man.
yeah.
It's just hands down.
The the problem with McFarlane is just overproduction of too many figures, but the Batman shit's
Mhm.
been really great. It's been really
Yeah.
good, and that's my,
Mhm.
I was thinking about just this year, and that was definitely my favorite, like my favorite Batmobile of all time, and
Exactly.
when it's pretty affordable considering you do get a figure and the Batmobile together. So that was it.
Mhm.
I'm gonna for the toy that if I had stupid money and if Chet was on this cast, he might probably say the same thing. But the Robeson flagship
Oh,
Grimlock voice activated Transformer is like $1,400. But
yeah.
I've seen so many videos of that thing. It is freaking amazing. Like it's just
Mhm.
awesome. Like
Yeah.
transform this damn thing. Okay, when you do your editing, Dr. Brent, you got to show this thing because it not only transforms, but then when it transforms from its dinosaur mode to the actual robot, you put the gun and the sword in his
Mhm.
hand, and he's literally like battle scenes. It's just like it's so epic. I would never pay over $1,000 for this damn thing, but if I had stupid money to blow, that's the damn thing. That's the release of 2023, and they did an Optimus Prime one,
I
but
saw that
this
too. Mhm.
but this one Grimlock is like another level.
Well,
So
not only did they do the Optimus Prime, then less than a year, I think, months later, they came out with the trailer. So you could do the tractor, the trailer, and then have all the. It was just insane. But yeah, I've seen it. They keep running that commercial. If you're watching like YouTube videos or something, there's one where a father and son, he's kind of like telling the transformer, and you're like, yeah, that's great. I don't know if any father in the country would let his child play with a $1,400 toy. I
No.
think that's probably would be something that would be um, hands down would be most definitely something that would be for just to him. Not, but it looks great and everything else like that.
oh yeah,
It's
and
fantastic.
they just made a Buzz Lightyear for $1,000 that literally like wings come out like freaking light, like it looks like he's flying, but it's the
Oh my
new Buzz
goodness.
Lightyear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are we
Oops.
Yeah.
doing here? Like, no one's buying that shit. So
With the voice of Chris Evans.
yeah, it's like, dude, $1,000 for the new Buzz Lightyear.
And
You'd be selling those like hotcakes if it was the OG one.
you wonder, even though they've done like Optimus Prime and Grimlock and everything else, like there are tons of Transformers that they can keep doing that people look like.
Yeah.
Personally, I may have to blow my money if they do like a blaster that changes into the boombox and comes. I was like, okay, and if it can play music too, you got me.
Well, I'm saying if they do a Starscream, it turns into a jet and flies off. Mr.
Yeah,
Storm's buying that shit. I like. There's no
yeah,
question about it. He's gonna be
yeah,
doing a podcast. He's actually gonna activate this thing. And it's gonna be flying over his head.
yeah. They'll be putting it on the American Express card. Yes, it will.
Well, it is now time for our best of series. For those of you maybe listening or viewing for the very first time, every podcast we do a best of series. So make sure you go back to previous episodes. We've done a variety of different things. Last week we did the best of like comic book, like iconic characters, books, all that stuff. I think we all settled like Vertigo was like one of the best damn uh, comic book publishers of all time. We'll
Mhm.
probably expand that topic. But it got us thinking about comic book runs of all time. We teased this last podcast. So, what is the best all time comic book run? For those of you who are not comic book fans, this basically constitutes within a series. And Dr. Brantley, Mr. Storm, please, if you want to elaborate further, but let's say Batman as an example of a specific book, and there are different writers and artists over time, over a period, that will write and or pencil the artwork, and we're saying this writer or this artist or this duo did it best. They did the best storytelling. It was the best art. It was super captivating. It was legendary over a course in time. So it could be a limited run. It could be like over time. tell me if I'm missing anything there, but I just make sure that people who are not super comic book fans understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, I guess I'll elaborate too. And I think he did it actually kind of wonderful. But it's like, again, it's like if you ran with Batman, but who was maybe your favorite artist and
Yep.
writer and the run that he did. Now, run is basically like, from one issue to their ending issue. So if you have, like, let's say, Jim Lee on X-Men, it would be his run. If you thought that was his best run, then, it'd be from Uncanny X-Men till this numbered issue. So who did the best runs? And this was teased last week, and believe me, this was probably, other than we said, I know, because also I'd like to say one thing out to some of our comments. We were pointing out, somebody was like, "Hey, you guys didn't mention Spawn. You didn't mention," and there was some that were pointing out that absolutely, you're absolutely right. We did miss those, but tonight we've got some runs, so we're going to miss them. So hit us in the comments for that. But I'm going to start it off. I think one of the better runs for me is Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, the Fantastic Four run that they did from the 60s. They had a consecutive artist. I believe they went over, I think it was like 50 or 60 issues. It was a long run. But that's the run. You're not going to see too many artists make that nowadays. And that's probably one of the better runs.
And did you
Um,
actually read them?
I've read, because I do own Fantastic Four number 52 with the Black Panther run, and I've read some of the archives, not per the issues, but
Well,
some of
no,
the
not the
trades and things.
originals, but like, yeah, all
Yeah,
the archive stuff.
but some of the archive stuff, yes. And I thought, look, they introduced, look, this is the Fantastic Four is the modern era book that launched the Marvel Universe into the relevancy that it is today. So it's a must if you're a Marvel fan, or even if you're not, if you're just in the DC and you want to know what all the hoopla was about. It basically, they had turned the average man average issues, because if you look at DC, everything's based off of Metropolis or Gotham or something. This is New York. This is like Yonkers and all the other places. It's like you can have like destinations that you could really go to. So I'm gonna put that in. So Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Fantastic Four. I thought their run was great.
One of the best of all time, I recommend. I'm really going on record here. First off, one of my favorite writers of all time, and I'll probably divulge a little bit later in this topic, but Garth Ennis, who's
Mm,
done an amazing amount of work. His run on Punisher, if you all remember, he
I
used the
do.
Max line to do a little bit more gritty, hard edge, more violent than anybody had ever seen Punisher do. 1 through 60 run with Tim Bradstreet doing covers
Mm,
is some of the most iconic stuff that the Punisher's ever, like, he nailed the character. Like that's, if anybody's like, well, I'm not like a superhero like Superman, like, read one, like, even if you did half of that run, man, and the way he transformed that character and really made the Punisher is some of the best writing of all time, in my opinion. So I would say Ennis's run, Punisher, Max, pick it up. I think you can pick it up in graphic novel, a
you
series of
can.
graphic novels at this point.
You
But I would
can.
recommend it, man. If you're a fan of like that, like you like a little bit more hard edge, a little violent, you're into the Punisher. Nobody's done it better, in my opinion, on paper than Garth
Well,
Ennis.
I will say, because I think someone did do it better about
Uh
20 years earlier, and that was Punisher War Journal. And you have
oh.
Carl Potts,
Ball
Jim
pots.
Lee, and
Yeah.
then right after that run, it was Mike Barron and Mark
Mm-hmm.
Texeira.
Architecture.
And I loved
Ooh.
all of those. That was
Did you
fantastic.
like Garth Ennis's run?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Mhm.
I
But
love that we're talking Punisher. Like, this is awesome. He never gets any love.
no, that
But
was one of my favorite books when I
what
started.
about it? What was like, what
oh,
Well, I
compared the
mean,
two?
Carl Potts and Jim Lee,
Jim Lee. Mhm.
Oh, I mean Jim Lee. Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so that was the first thing. It's like, yeah, the Punisher, the regular book, it was okay. Art wise, the stories were good, but
Mhm.
it was like a typical Marvel book. Jim Lee elevated all of
Well,
that, and he started inking.
What
Is
year
where
I'm
he,
was
I'm
what
gonna I'm
what
gonna
year was
beg to
that?
differ. 86 if I'm not
Mid
mistaken.
80s.
But I'm a
Okay.
beg to differ with you, Dr. Brantley, because they had two dramatic artists on both books because they had Carl Potts wrote both series, and you had Will Spertatio that was on the
Mm.
Punisher regular series, and then you had Jim Lee on Punisher War Journal. And I remember the very first it was Punisher, I think it was either Punisher 11 or 13, maybe 14, where they had ripped off I guess the movie The Substitute, and he had the Punisher on it where he was writing "My name is Mr. Castle" on the board, and he has like a briefcase and there's a gun on the table and everything. And I was like, wow, I said, this is not the kiddie stuff that I was used to reading. And I went to a comic book store and I said, hey, I want to. I was actually given that by my 11th grade teacher. He was like, man, you need to do something with your talent. And I remember I went into a comic book store. I said, hey, do you have any more of this Punisher? Because it doesn't seem as kiddie as the other books. And he goes, yeah. And it was Punisher War Journal, I believe, number 11, where they had Frank Castle and he had a tank. And he had sprayed the Punisher War Journal or the Punisher logo on the top of the tank. And I was like, okay, I'm down for this.
How long was that? How long was the run? Like what? How many?
I think in total he did between 10 to 13
I've
issues of
never
that
read it.
before he moved
I've
on.
never read
Oh,
it. Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
got to
it's
read it.
good.
I'm gonna pick it up.
then that's going to be a Christmas present, brother. I'm going to send that over to you. That trade
Yeah,
paperback.
look. I love Punisher. I haven't followed Punisher throughout his, but like
Yeah.
I would love to read it. If you're stacking it with
Mhm.
Ennis's work, man, I'm all for it.
Yeah, no, it's a great run, and it's what essentially got me into comics because it was the first time that something had not seemed extremely kiddie.
Yep.
It was like
Yep.
it was rugged, it was raw. It's like, wow, why aren't the other books like this? And then eventually they made all the other books like that, and you're like, okay, what's wrong? So, all right, well, since we're throwing that run in, I've got to say, uh, one, let's throw in. I really can't say a run because it's almost hard, but damn near almost anything that Alan Moore has done.
Yeah.
From his League of Extraordinary Gentlemen to his Swamp Thing to his like
Yeah.
this man
Tom
has
Strong,
had
even some of that stuff was good.
this man has had runs every time. His Supreme, he was one of the few guys that made a Rob Liefeld property damn near a must read. Alan Moore, anything that he touched, so he's got 3 or 4 that are really truly amazing. I will also say, in that point, you're going on iconic people. Let's go, Chris Claremont. Here's a guy that wrote like the X books from the 70s into the 90s.
Yeah.
Like, man had a run, man. He had a run.
Yeah.
Dr. Brantley?
And that's all the iconic stuff from the X-Men is from that time. Like every bit of it, everything they used for the movies.
Yeah, he's synonymous with X-Men. Like there isn't anybody else. It's literally
whether it's a
X-Men, Claremont. Yeah.
If a movie, animated, whatever, any
Everything.
form of like you've seen on television, that man is the reason for it being that great.
Yeah.
So if you like,
nobody's done
whatever,
it since.
No. No.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, I think this is a name that everyone recognizes in Frank Miller, but I think specifically for his work on Batman Year One was awesome. I think, a multitude of different Batman reads, but I would say that is definitely one that I would recommend. I think that was some of his best work. And I think I forget the artist. I think the artist also did,
it was Klaus Janson.
No, it's
no.
Mazzucchelli who did the Daredevil Born Again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I like that style too for that type of like it just worked, right? So Frank Miller's got a couple other titles, but that is one I would definitely recommend. And I would just say to echo what you said, Mr. Storm, I think Alan Moore, specifically The Killing Joke, like again, we could go through all of that, but we're talking about Batman again. I don't think, if you do Year One and Killing Joke, if you're not going to read anything else Batman wise, if you just did those two, I think you don't have to read anything else again. But I know you'd all argue, but I would say those are two iconic reads.
Well, I'm going to argue it right now
because
I love it. That's why we're talking.
Is Detective Comics,
Okay,
and that was my favorite Batman book. It's the original. Batman shows up in, what was it, issue 27,
Hmm.
on the, and I don't know, what are they? Did they cross 1,000
Yeah,
on
yeah, way over that.
Batman
Mhm.
a couple years ago? But the first run of Detective that is fantastic, I think, is Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams.
If there's a master to like artist and like creative duel, they were. I would say next to Stanley and Jack Kirby, they were maybe the biggest duels to do so because it's like all the Batman. There's no Ra's al Ghul. There's no Lazarus
Mhm.
Pits. There's none of these things that took Batman out of Gotham. If
Well,
you
and it
don't
took
have
it
those guys,
he took it seriously,
he
where
did.
because
He
it was
did
coming off of the 60s and
exactly.
the TV
Hmm.
show, and all the comic books were silly. It was like, oh,
Hmm.
Rainbow Batman and Batman
Hmm.
in space, and all this stupid stuff.
Hmm.
And they brought it back down to earth and made it like gritty and hard. And it's like, oh, yeah, this guy is traumatized because his parents died.
Hmm.
We should put that into the story. And so
Yeah.
that's where all that stuff comes from, really.
and if
Before, he's just fighting crime.
And if we're going to keep it in Batman, and let's just make this because we don't want to just jeopardize it up. But Jeff Loeb and Tinsale, the God rest his soul, Tinsale, the Long Halloween, and any of
Oh yeah,
those, if you
yeah.
just masterfully of another writer artist duel. It's like when you have a perfect collaboration between two individuals, that's what makes comics such a wonderful thing. And we've been blessed to live in, like, I really think, one of the best era of that, where it's not just an artist or writer, it takes two of them to pull off this beautiful thing. So
Yeah.
our one of our listeners that always comments, and I wanted to give him credit, Mr. Rad, he said Spawn, and I will give him something today because he is right on one thing. I'm not going to say McFarlane's run because McFarlane's run was very small when it came to art wise, but Greg Capullo, his run on Spawn,
Oh,
he
Capullo. Yeah,
defined how
yeah,
Spawn is looked at.
yep.
It's like this man did magic on the page, and he did it for a long span of time. So I'm going to say that Greg Capullo's run on Spawn is even more important than Tom McFarlane's run on it because, the longevity of that character, I don't think would have been, if McFarlane would have been doing those issues, I don't think McFarlane would have pumped out that many.
Yep. Yep. Well, just to show that I'm not a old ass, and that I've also read stuff that's like in the 2000s, because we're talking about some old books. I think Mark Miller and McNiven's run Civil
So,
War is great, iconic. Um, I think
Right up to the
obviously,
end.
yeah, but still a good read. It was
still good
like,
read.
a good crossover. I think it was like it felt like that the industry hadn't had something like that in a bit, and so
Mhm.
that was like a lot of hype. Remember, I think it was we were still going to conventions, and that's what
Yes.
people were talking
Hmm.
about. Obviously, it some of that stuff was pulled into the movies, but I think both of them did a fantastic job. And then for a limited run, I think it was a great crossover
Hmm.
event, and I
Hmm.
would recommend anybody reading it, regardless of how it all evolved. It was really good. So I would
Hmm.
say, and it's quick read too.
I would say a Neil Gaiman Sandman run. Like, first
Yeah.
of all, it's got a great television show that's right on Netflix right now, which is just amazing. But like, here's a character that you're really not thinking is main character. There's so many dimensions to it. But Neil Gaiman, not who is now more or less known to be in films and television more than comics, is like he's a great representation of like the media because when
Yep.
you see him and you see the work that he's done, it can be taken. Like I saw businessmen in like suits and ties reading like Gaiman's work. That's when you were like, that's when it moved to the mainstream. When it's like somebody's like, oh, this is a graphic novel. They started calling it graphic novels instead of comic books. You know,
Yep.
so Neil Gaiman's gonna always hold my heart with that, man.
Now, going back to Detective Comics, because that's got to be probably my favorite of all time. And the people that got me into comics more broadly, because when I first started into comics, the first reason I went in was because I found out DC was publishing a Star Trek comic book, and I loved Star Wars and Star Trek, so I went in to see what that was. And so I was going in for a couple months and only getting a couple things like that, but then I was like, oh, Batman, it was this show, it's going to be kind of silly, childish, but let me pick this one up because the cover looks kind of cool. And that was Breyfogle and Grant. Alan Grant, Norm Breyfogle. And I was blown away because it was the second part of a story, but it was so good that I went back and got the first one, and then I started going to get back issues. And I just love Norm Breyfogle's look. I don't think Batman has looked much better. He had this really cool, like, Art Deco kind of style that just lent itself well. And he did the greatest capes as well, But
I will say from the Shadow Crew podcast, thank you, Mr. Mike Mignola, for Hellboy. Thank you. There's a run of a modern day character that is probably looked at in the same vein as, like, Batman and Superman, and he's notable all over the world. Is Mike Mignola's just brilliant run on Hellboy itself, and the continuing work that he keeps doing. Because whenever there's a Mike Mignola book that pops out, I usually try to run to it. So thank you, Mr. Mignola, for your great work.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to say Mark Miller again with Brian Hitch Ultimates.
Oh.
I think early 2000s reimagined the Avengers, kind of felt a bit stale, and boom, came in, and that was like the hottest book. I remember going to the shops, and that's all anybody was talking about, and kind of shaped the vision of some of what we saw the Avengers movies to be. So,
well, I mean, they willed Sam Jackson into the part of Nick Fury.
That's true. That's true. So
it is.
Anybody who hasn't read those, I think that is probably one of the best representations of Avengers books, and well written, great art. It's easy to find those graphic novels too. I still have those.
Oh yeah,
I hung on to those, man. Those are just pick those up and reread every couple of years.
I will say Brian Azzarello and Ed Russo, 100 Bullets.
Yeah.
100 issues of just pure great storyline.
It was them the whole time, right? No, it was them the entire run.
Them the whole time. 100 bullets, 100,
awesome.
100 issues.
It's just amazing.
If there's a run, and
like no one got sick, no one fought, no one got fired. It's like pump out 100, man.
And they continued publishing it.
Yeah, it was a complete series. You can run it from issue 1 to issue 100, and it's like one of those maximum opus that you can just put on a shelf somewhere. So I'm going to give all the credit to them, because every issue was like 100 issues, every issue. Wow.
Now, this is one that I really don't hear talked about much, and it was, I don't know, like 15 years ago. Chew, which was an image book.
Mm-hmm. I do remember that.
Who was it?
John Layman.
John Layman, Rob Guillory.
Yep.
Chew?
Mm-hmm. Chew.
Yeah, and it was about a guy whose his power was he could eat a person, like eat a piece of something, and have like psychic visions of what happened to them. So he would take a bite of a dead person and find out what happened to them and try and solve the crimes. So it was just
I'm
weird,
shocked
interesting.
that never became an actual series for like HBO or somebody made a leap, because it was so odd and crazy. And you got to think in the days of The Walking Dead and
funny,
AMC and all the rest. I'm kind of shocked that never made the kind of leap to another media, because it definitely should have. John Byrne's Man of Steel. John Byrne redefined Superman in the same way that Miller redefined Batman. If you do not have Burns, you do not have Superman and the new mythology and all the new powers. He made him not as cosmic godlike. He was more or less brought back to Earth on a lot of things. So, thank you, John Byrne, wherever you're at. I'm sure you probably don't care.
The Goon. Eric
Oh,
Powell.
Eric Powell.
He's been
Yes.
doing that for years. I don't know
Hmm.
how long, but I
Since it
love.
was at Dark Horse, I remember there was a Dark Horse Presents issue that had a black and white version of the Goon story in it. And the first time I saw it, I was like, this is an interesting character. And then I saw he has just progressed as an artist because he was doing like flat pencil and ink work. And now he's just like, his colors and everything else. It's just, wow, amazing
and
run.
and the Chinatown book was
Yes.
amazing.
Hmm. And also, if Blizzard had ever gotten, I think it was Blizzard, that if they had ever done that movie, it would have been the first one in line for it because just the trailer short they did is amazing.
Yeah, they had Clancy Brown as the Goon voice
Hmm.
and Paul Giamatti as Frankie,
Yeah.
and it was so good.
David Finch, it's supposed to be
But
directed by David Finch, too. It's just
yeah,
sad that we
Fincher.
never
Yeah,
saw that because that was going to be pretty good.
One of my favorite characters of all time, John Constantine, Hellblazer, that was created by Mr. Alan Moore. And
Hmm.
the best run, in my opinion, was Garth Ennis's run of that
Hmm.
91 through 94 is probably the best writing of that particular character. So if you are interested in seeing what that's about, I know they made a movie with Keanu Reeves. I think it was pretty good, but I think Hellblazer, Garth Ennis, and I would also say too, in Garth Ennis, this is 3 top runs, but Preacher that he
Oh, yeah.
wrote but also developed and created is also really great. So I think, in my
Hmm.
opinion, if we did the best writers of all time, he'd be in my top 5 personally, and I
Most
think
definitely.
probably regarded top 10 of all time. Just, I mean, you think about the work of Punisher, Preacher, Hellblazer. I mean, those alone should qualify you for some of the best work in comic book writing. So those would be mine.
I think that's going to have to be in one of those things now. Since last week we visited, it's got to be like the top writers and the top artists in the best stuff series. We're definitely going to have to put that on the 2024 docket for
hmm
that, man.
Yeah.
well, because there's a couple like Frank Miller, Give Me Liberty. I
Yeah.
loved that series,
Hmm.
but he's got so many things that he wrote and didn't do the art on,
Yeah,
and
big
things that he
guy,
wrote
Rusty the
and
Robot.
did. hmm
Him and Jeff Darrells. There's just
Hard
like
boiled and
you look at so many of the great writers and artists and their runs, and that's the one thing that I think excites fans is like a good run, a good artist that comes in, I think can fix mostly any of the problems and everything. And when I say that too, I'm gonna be like David Michelin and Todd McFarlane, his amazing Spider-Man run. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have the superstar artist in the way that they are, and I don't think we have Todd himself as being the person who's doing everything from from films to directing music videos to owning toys. Like that was the thing that made him was that amazing. That but also had Venom in that run as well, which now he's got another franchise. So David Michelin, I know a lot of people think it's just Todd McFarlane did that. David Michelin was the writer of that. Those two guys worked their magic together.
The Tick, Ben Edlund. I
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
love that book. I found it just, going through because I love the independent stuff much more than
Mm-hmm.
Marvel and DC. So I would always look for some weird stuff. And then I saw number one of The Tick, and it was an oversized book, slightly bigger than regular comics. So it didn't fit in any plastic covers or anything, which sucked. But it was just so weird and funny that I just started collecting right from the beginning. And luckily, Fox caught on a couple years later and
Mm-hmm.
made the animated show,
Mm-hmm.
which was hilarious.
And if you're throwing that down too, and I haven't read all of the run, but I've read enough. If were like giving Tom McFarlane his accolades on Spawn being the oldest book, the book that he beat out was Dave Sims and Cerebus, which was the hark back from the 1970s that ran independently. And I don't think we have you don't have the images, you don't have any of these other companies without Dave Sims breaking hand in hand on the artwork, just running it through. So, there's so many great runs that we may have to do like, 5, 6, or 7 series of this thing, because God knows one best of series can't contain it all.
I want to say, because I don't want to be like, oh, well, you were always talking about these older things. Um, Somebody had recommended to me an interesting read that I'll probably pick up for a character that I normally have not read. Venom 2018, Donny Cates and Ryan
Oh, I've heard
Stegman
that.
is supposed to be really good
I've
run
heard.
for Venom.
Hmm.
So in efforts to maybe read a couple of the books that have come out the past couple of years, that would be one that I haven't read, but I think doing some due diligence and making sure we pick up some new books, I think would be interesting to talk about. So I'm going to put that on my list of things to pick up at the shop, um, and see if it's any good, because I think Venom's a cool character if written well. Could be interesting, but I've heard that like stands out. That everyone says that when I talk about shit that I should read the past couple of years.
Well, like I said, when it gets the stuff to get you back in, I picked up GI Joe 301 by Larry Hama, who had been running
Mm.
this run all the way from Marvel to Devil's Due to IDW, now over at Skybound.
Devils do. Wow, I haven't
Yeah,
heard that in a
in
while.
a while. Mr. Hama, you got to give him credit. Like, 301 issues now, 3.2. This should be popping up soon. Uh, just, it's like the Energizer Bunny just keeps on going, you know?
I loved the show, and our favorite guy, Joss Whedon, came back to write Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Mm,
And it was just like the next, and they called it
I remember
season
it.
8.
Hmm.
But it was great. It was the actual writer of the show, and great artwork for the most part. And it was a great run for a while. But it was just, continuing on the story with the same characters and the same tone.
Oh,
Uh, but yeah, if you like Buffy, pick it up because it's great.
Now, since we're saying about current runs, I was in a comic book store. I just happened to pop in one like a couple of months ago, and I picked it up. I didn't pick up the individual issues. I picked up the graphic novels, but this will make Chet extremely happy to watch this. Strange Academy,
mm-hmm.
through Marvel Comics, with Scotty Young as the writer, Herberto Ramos as the artist. That was pretty current, and you know what? It was one where it led me to go back into the store and look at other properties and other situations. I think I went in a couple times to pick up that Batman Spawn and a couple other newer books, but that was a really good series that unfortunately just I guess never caught its traction. But the same thing, Chris, that they told me about the Colts and Stegeman's run on that Venom, and I was like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna. There is some good work still currently being produced that is just maybe not getting the attention that it should. So that's one of those things that maybe we should start bringing a bigger light to the show.
Yep. I haven't heard
Now,
Captain. I haven't heard of Captain America,
the
and
Winter
we talked
Soldier.
about it last.
True,
Uh,
true. Yeah.
was that Brubaker and Epting?
Yep, it was. One
Brubaker.
of the better teams, which also Brew Baker as a writer too. Again, that best writers list, boy, there's be some guys that's gonna like really set that ablaze. Artist wise, that's almost an easy list. I don't think you have to have a debatable scenario with that. But writer wise, like if we had to put that in the top 10, that would be an argument. There will 100% be an argument because there is at least 30 top tier writers currently that I think I could put on that list.
Yeah, I agree.
Planetary, Ellis
Oh,
and
Yep,
Cassidy,
it is. You're right.
and then going a little bit way back, Suicide Squad, John Ostrander.
mm,
Mm.
I loved that because that's when I starting to get into the Batman, and so I was going to these other things that sometimes they'd have Batman cameo, or it would be a crossover or stuff like that. But that was really cool. Um,
Robert Kirkman is Walking Dead run
yep.
with Charlie Allred. It's not coincidence or luck that you produced a book that long. It's because you have some skills to do it, and that, and also his let's say his Invincible run. Because right now, it's a television show on Amazon Prime, and that source material is what they base that show off of. So we've been pretty blessed, man. As you go over this list, you're thinking that when comics are in trouble, you're like, well, how could they be with so many great pieces of modern day literature work? Like, it definitely needs a brighter light shined onto it, brother. I'm glad we're doing this tonight.
Yep. Yep.
And I
Anything
think the
else
last
that
one
yeah.
I have is because I loved the movie, uh, and I picked up the book right after, and it was Scott Pilgrim and
Mm.
Brian Lee O'Malley, and it was, I think there's like 8 or 9 books,
Hmm.
and it's like a manga, and it was just very funny, original, weird, and very much like the movie.
We probably forgot a bunch. These are our opinions, but there's a bunch of like
Hmm.
legendary runs,
Hmm.
the names that we probably have left off, and that's okay. I didn't hear Bendis or Straczynski that will pop up, but it wasn't on our lists, so
Hmm.
may not be top 5, top 10 for us. There's a couple of other names. Rob Liefeld didn't make the list. I'm surprised that not our writing.
But his
Um,
his Alan Moore series, Supreme, did. So, he's in there, honorable mention, I guess.
I did want to say, what about Kevin Smith? Any of his
What
work,
about him?
Daredevil, Green Arrow,
Let's
anything
see.
like?
Oh,
His Daredevil with Joe Quesada, that launched the Marvel Knight series. And that's probably the best piece of work I've read from him.
Okay, all right. Not big Kevin Smith fans. Got it.
Yeah,
Understood.
well,
I like the movies,
yeah.
but the stuff that I have, I now look, I didn't read any of that stuff, Daredevil or that, but some of the other things that he's done comic wise, I have read, and I was not that impressed, so I
Mm,
didn't bother reading more.
Well, now,
yeah.
Mr. Smith, if you're watching the show,
Sorry.
don't take Dr. Brittley's negative comments as a reason not to come
I
on
like the
tonight.
movies, man. I like
But
your
if you
movies.
but if you're gonna come on, we're gonna show you some love. So
You even like the Bruce Willis movie?
Cop Out. It
Yeah.
has a great
it's very funny
couple
the
of
first two.
laughs over the course of an hour and
Mm,
a half.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
Most of it is pretty terrible,
Okay.
but there's
okay.
All right.
some great stuff, some
Just
funny stuff.
checking. Just checking. Well, that about does it for our best of series. Again, please comment if we've missed anything. Feel free to also share your opinions on the channel. As we wrap things up, the one thing we have to do each and every week is we love to recognize and work with independent comic book shops and toy stores. So again, if there's any interest, reach out to us. We'd love to feature you on the show. And, at the end of the day, we're excited about opening up things on screen, whether that be here or on our various unboxing segments that Mr. Chet Maddox produces. But our sponsor, Mr. Storm.
Again, toys versus games. It is getting close to the Christmas season, and I know you'll probably be looking for something, maybe some hard to find item that you're not going to catch in the major stores or something. Maybe it might be at Toys versus Games. And it's always nice to put your money into the independent shops anyway. So we're hoping that you pop in, say that the Shadow Crew sent you. I do know this. I spoke to Shadow this morning. He is going to be there. I think either Tuesday and Wednesday of this week to pop in. So if anybody's out there and you happen to be in Wilmington, California, and you go to Toys versus Games, you may catch Shadow there. And maybe Shadow might have something that you want, or vice versa. There might be a swap somewhere that would be made. And not so much a sponsor, but I went last week over the weekend to the SoCal Joe show, and it was in the Embassy Suites in Temecula, California. A fantastic show. They had it wasn't a huge show. It was a nice, cozy show, but the vendors were extremely nice. They had some incredible, vendors that were selling not just action figures and everything. They had some customs on some stuff that you see. And I'd never seen that much customization up front. And a lot of those guys, the work they do, the 3D prints. There is a couple of people that we next couple of weeks or so will have on to the show that we could do some interviews with. Met a lot of talented artists over there. So I just have to say, if it goes 2 times a year. We're in Southern California. Great show, great individuals. People were just nice and heartwarming. It's some of the better contacts that I've made at a convention. It was just really down to earth. It was just really a nice time and a good community. If you're, whether you're GI Joe or into any kind of military, they had 3 3/4, a bunch of other things, but it was pretty cool to go to. So I will be attending that. I think it's in March or something, but we'll put up information. I'll go back to another one.
If there's anything that I regret about my toy collecting as a young child, is I wish I hung on and took better care of my original GI Joe figures, man.
Yes.
And if I had a ton of them, and if I had them today, well, I mean, some of them have the loose legs because they'd be thrown off, buildings and things. But
or
still,
some made their ways into fireworks explosion. And now that would be considered toy photography, but who knew then?
That's right.
We were just blowing shit up with firecrackers.
Exactly. Made some expensive mistakes with that one, I can tell you.
Oh man. Channel updates. So look for we're doing some different aesthetic designs and title fonts and things. So more to come as we evolve the channel. I think hopefully those of you who are just tuning in and those who've been following along, we're trying different things, new content, new art, things like that. So that's coming into the new year, as well as new unbox from Mr. Chet Maddox and others. Christmas retrospect is coming. So again, if you haven't had an opportunity to check the retrospects on the channel, hosted by Dr. Brantley and Mr. Storm, some really great stuff. Shadowe, a new hunt, a video. If you haven't checked that out, if you're looking to find deals, he's the guy that knows where to go, and other things that are on their way, including the Tech Master Return. So as always, please like, comment, subscribe. It helps the channel grow. And recommend, refer a friend, if you will. But any last thoughts before we adjourn this evening, gentlemen?
Yes, I would say, Chet, and I know you weren't on the show, and I know you're busy jet setting and wheeling and dealing and all the rest of the stuff you're doing, Cadillac riding. Put your comments in the bottom, because I'm sure he's sitting at home, because I know he's going to say best comic series was the Five Ghosts of Fabian. I'm sure that's, but just all Chet's information will be put into the comments of this podcast.
Yeah. And if we do a best of art artists, Scotty Young's going to be one for him. So let's just get that out of the way. So we'll have to compete against get that. So awesome. Well, Dr. Brantley, anything for you? Last thoughts?
Nope.
All right.
Have a good evening.
See you later.